Hey, Elizabeth. It's good to see you here. Welcome back. How are you? Oops, you're muted, but I heard you say very well. Or I lip read you saying very well. How are you? You can unmute.
Yes, I've just been watching the most
I still can't hear you. How's your audio?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I think that might have been on my end. Sorry about that. I really wanted to hear what you had to say.
I've just finished watching the last YouTube. So I've just said bye-bye to you on YouTube. So
hello and goodbye, and then goodbye and hello again.
Oh, yeah, nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Elizabeth, what was your takeaway from what you watched? What was your biggest takeaway from the last meeting?
Lots and lots of things. I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about seeing people as a whole and how to explain in a way that wasn't a rejecting way about how you might want to work alongside somebody else. And also the equivalent kind of conversation about if you want to hand on to someone else who's put their trust in you, even if you didn't think that you were actually helping them, that presumably they're getting some benefit from coming to see you, although you might not see what it is at that time. I thought that was really helpful, what you said about being patient and not handing on, because that could feel like a rejection, especially if somebody has already been to see several different sorts of people. And then they just handed from pillar to post, don't they? Mm-hmm. So it's a lot about waiting and patience and not necessarily having all the answers, because that was another theme, I think, was about not necessarily having the answer at the time. Mm-hmm. And just being aware of what you were able to do. Mm-hmm. Very interesting discussion, I thought. Really useful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you got good takeaways from that, for sure. And what I'm hearing you say is so common. I feel like practitioners, we like to get ourselves angsty about having all the answers and having them quickly. And there's really, I get there's an ability behind wanting to have that, for sure. There's no judgment on my part whatsoever. And I think what we overlook when we get tied to the expediency of having an answer is what we overlook is the power in being present.
Mm-hmm. Just being with the person, sharing, and trying to understand.
Mm-hmm. Especially when they're in pain.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think acknowledging that someone's in pain can make a big difference. Mm-hmm.
1,000%. And so it's more like we are a way of being with them, being present, compassionate, patient, as you said, parasympathetic nervous system focused in our way of being, which is very different than doing and answering and resolving.
Mm-hmm. There's a phrase that I really like, which is, you know how people say, don't just, hang on, I'm trying to remember it. I have to get it the right way around. Don't just sit there, do something. Mm-hmm. Whereas what we want to do is, don't just do something, sit there.
Mm-hmm. Be something.
Yeah, don't just do something, sit there. So it's about permitting ourselves as well to sometimes just sit and be with someone and not do something.
Exactly. And I'll take that a step further if you'll let me. It's not completely accurate when we're present to suggest that we aren't doing something.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Being with someone and just being present, not just being with someone and being fully present, is huge.
Yes, because I think we can hold on to people's anxieties as well, be a container for anxiety. It gives people a place to put upset feelings.
Yes, and we don't need to be a reservoir. However, when we are in a society where people like to run and hide and be busy and deflect, embodying presence for them is already turning them in a new direction that they might not have been in up until now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and recognizing that applies to us as well as to to clients. Yeah.
1000%. 1000%. Yep, exactly. Amazing. So, Elizabeth, remind me, are you a movement or manual practitioner or both?
I'm originally a doctor, medical practitioner, and psychiatrist, and I've now trained as a fitness instructor and a personal trainer. And I've trained with Original Strength. I don't know if you know Original Strength, Tim Anderson, which is a movement education system, which aims to help the nervous system to feel safe, basically.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a beautiful tie into what your previous line of work. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, very much so.
Love it. And so are you primarily now doing movement?
Yes, I've been training ladies of my age, ladies in their 60s, healthy, active women. And I'm now looking to start a group of older women than that, probably women in their 70s and 80s, to help them with their mobility. And I think it'll be a very different kind of group, actually.
Yeah.
And so I'm just starting to plan ahead and think, how am I going to manage that? Because there will be different challenges there. People much more limited in their movement abilities, and probably much more frightened as well about doing things like getting down onto the floor or getting onto knees and so on.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Elizabeth, I remember talking to you about this a few weeks ago.
Yes,
You
and
were
we were talking
mentioning
about things that you can do in a chair, which has been really useful because we were able to work with being in a chair and then progress to using the chair to help to get down onto the floor and feel safe on the floor.
Wonderful. And have you implemented those things?
Yes, have done. Yes, and that's been very, very useful.
Great.
Very useful. Yeah,
Oh, I love that.
We're making progress.
I love that. That's so good to hear. Great, great. Thanks for coming back to share that. So I love that.
Thank you.
So while we're here, do you want to be hot seated right away out of the gate, like right in? Do you have a question or something you're working on that I can support?
What I'm thinking along, I don't know if this is a good question for you or not, but I'm thinking about, I know how important it is to have good alignment and good movement before you apply load. And I'm just thinking, when you are at the point of applying load, are there any particular tools that you find most useful? And what would you use for, say, an older population? I've got different tools. I've got little sandbags, I've got resistance bands, I've got little light kettlebells. And I'm just interested to hear what kind of things you use when you get to this point of applying load to someone who's improved their alignment sufficiently to cope with using load and natural body movements like squatting and walking. So that's my...
Yeah, I love your question. And I have an answer that's already come to me. And while you said, I'm not sure if this is a good question, I'm not sure if you're going to like my answer, but we'll just go for it. We'll just go for it. Okay. So yes, you heard me say that alignment is paramount before function, and definitely paramount before weight bearing function. Absolutely has to be alignment first, or you are literally walking into an injury, even if it's just compensatory patterns. It's black and white. There's no way around that. So when you said improve alignment before weight bearing, warning bells go off in my head, because it's not about improving it. It's about optimizing it, or else. Right? I'm being a little bit dramatic just to drive the point. I'm being dramatic just to drive the point. You might have been on the class, I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before, where I shared with you all that a friend of mine had been doing weight loading, got a new trainer, personal trainer to come to the house, and was really working on improving chest and shoulders. And the alignment on my friend is not optimized and difficult because not a client, right? So, kind of talking about it, but not like commanding it like I do when I'm in, my clinical setting. And sure enough, in 3 weeks, he's injured. And not in the way that I had predicted. So it wasn't a shoulder problem. That is what I predicted. He couldn't turn his neck. So it is technically a shoulder problem, because the shoulder is the shelf that holds up the neck. And the shoulder is thoracic alignment. So the axial skeleton component there is the thoracic, which ties into the cranium and the sacrum. It's all alignment. It's all functional alignment. So he can't turn his neck, which means there's a shoulder problem, as I predicted. I wasn't crystal balling and like putting it on him, but I saw it happening. It's again, we're not in alignment and we're weight loading. We are headed towards injury. It's black and white.
Mhm.
So I ended up working on him right now he is a client, and I ended up working on him. And sure enough, it was all in the thoracic cavity. Hey, Robert, you're working out, no shirt, bed head, straight hair. That's okay. Okay, well, thanks for the honesty. I love it. You're still welcome to come on though. Even being a hot mess, you're still welcome to come and contribute. And I'm happy to pour into you if you have a question. Thanks for letting us know. That just cracked me up. Okay, so Elizabeth, back to the question at hand. So alignment is paramount, even in somebody who's not in an elderly population, even in someone who's physically active, even with someone who works out regularly and always has for 40 years, still can end up in an injury if their weight load changes on top of alignment that's not great. And this isn't his first injury. He's had other injuries before, but then like regulated how much weight load, which really doesn't solve the problem. It just takes away the symptom. It takes away revealing the misalignment. So sometimes we think that pain and injury from weight loading is a symptom. It's not. It's a revealing of a misalignment.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about it. That's very useful.
Awesome. So glad that landed. Yeah, for sure. So when we get to an elderly population, they're not any different than another population with the exception of time. And what I mean by that is muscles are classified in two different groups, phasic and intrinsic. The intrinsic muscles are the muscles that do posture and alignment and balance, which is also often challenged in an elderly population.
Yes.
Gravity is pulling on intrinsic muscles as their nemesis, which means that their alignment is more important at that stage than it's ever been, because now they have a weakening in intrinsic muscles, which are responsible for the posture that's mandatory to do weight loading. Do you see?
Yes, yes, do, yes. So do you think restoring those intrinsic muscles, the what you might call the reflexive strength, then that's obviously the big priority, isn't it?
Well, when you say reflective strength, I'm going to answer your question after I get clarity. What do you mean by reflexive strength?
I think I mean the stabilizing muscles. You know, quite often we think about the prime movers and don't necessarily think about the other important supporting muscles.
Okay. So yeah. So I'm glad that I asked for clarity here, Elizabeth, because in the phasic classification of muscles, there are muscles that stabilize. And in the intrinsic group of muscles, there are no phasic muscles that do action.
Yes, right.
All they do is posture and balance.
Yes.
Okay?
So they're really key. They're
really key. They're really key. And here's the key to the key. When we are engaging intrinsic muscles that have been weakened over time because gravity's been pulling on them longer in an elderly person because they've just had more minutes opposing gravity or not, when we get them back into alignment, we're literally strengthening them because we're using muscles that aren't being used.
Yes, without using any load or any other
without
tool.
needing to load. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's really the right formula. It's still posture and alignment first.
And it's still strength training.
And it's then strength training, and then you get into function and load bearing.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's really helpful.
Awesome. So I'm not sure if you've studied intrinsic muscles before. Most folks that I've trained haven't yet heard of them.
No,
and that's
wouldn't have been thinking about classifying it in that way. Yeah. So that's useful to know.
Yeah, awesome. And I recommend it as a deep dive. I have a few courses where we cover it. If you are looking for more information on that, please let me know. I'm happy to guide you there.
Will do.
If you have your own resources, awesome, but definitely dive in deep to exactly how intrinsic muscles work.
Will do. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes. Homework to do. Thank you. I'll do my homework.
Love your question. Do you have any other questions? Any other way I can support you today?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so Robert, if you, you're welcome, Robert. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat if you don't want to come on camera. And I know there's a couple others that are here too, not on camera. Oh, there were. Yep. Okay. So if you're choosing not to come on camera today, no problem. Type your question in the chat and come on camera so I can interact with you. I love to connect with you. I want to serve you. So you being present helps me be present. So that would be great. I do want to share with you, a couple ideas that have come up this week. It feels like a really long week since I saw you guys last, by the way, a really long week. And I did want to come on yesterday, as I promised you guys last week, I'd be here on Tuesday. And I'm so glad you guys got the emails, because we had a problem with our email server. So the email that was meant to go out on Monday, on Monday didn't go out. And then on Tuesday didn't go out. And so then I couldn't come on yesterday without letting you guys know I was here. So here we are on Wednesday. I'm so glad you guys got the email. And next week, we're also going to be here on Wednesday because I'm in training on Monday and Tuesday. So that it works out okay. This week, Wednesday, next week, Wednesday, and then we'll get back to Tuesdays again. So for all those reasons and more, it feels like a really long time since I saw you last. It just feels like it's been one of those weeks. And client work seems to be consistent. No matter what the week is, there's always clients, because everybody's got a body and everybody is having an experience in their body for sure. So I'll put you on the spot, Elizabeth, a little bit, Elizabeth, if you don't mind. Do you have any idea how long, how many minutes pass or hours pass before the atrophy process in a muscle begins? And I'm referring to phasic muscles at this point.
How many hours from when?
From how many, what is the time frame? Let me ask a better question so I can set you up for success here. In what period of time does the atrophy process begin in a muscle, in a phasic muscle?
Well, I suppose from a metabolic point of view, I think muscle tissue is continuously being broken down and built up. So within minutes, probably, and then it would continue to atrophy if there wasn't an anabolic process taking place. So I think there's a flux, isn't there, continuously between breakdown and building up.
I love how clear you are in that. So so now I get to refine my question even again. In the absence of anabolic activity in a muscle, in what period of time would the atrophy process begin?
Okay, well, I'm going to guess that it might relate to just ordinary metabolism and say, how about 3 or 4 minutes?
Oh my goodness, I love that. Okay, great. I don't know about that. But here's what I know about atrophy. The atrophy process in a muscle, meaning when it stops losing its patterning and its tone and starts to disconnect in a sense from the input that the nervous system can give it, because it's not giving it any, that's why it's not moving. It begins within 24 hours, right? And so my example of that is when we've been ill, with the flu, and we're, laying on the couch for a few days recovering, which is mandatory. It's what our body needs, even energetically, to restore. Once we're past the bug and we're ready to get back up and move around again, we still feel, even though the bug is gone, we feel like we got hit by a truck.
Yes, you feel weak.
Because lots of reasons, one of them being the atrophy process has begun. So when muscles aren't strong, they're weak. That's, again, black and white. So we feel weak after being sedentary for 24 hours because we have started the atrophy process. Now, it doesn't mean that the muscles are 100% atrophied and we need, clinical rehabilitation. It's not meant to be dramatic in that sense. It's meant to offer curiosity about how long do we sit in one position during the day, right? Like I'm sitting right now because it's appropriate to do, but when I'm on calls, I'm standing and I'm doing leg lifts behind me. Otherwise, I'm literally in this position, wide awake, not sick, no flu, and I'm still creating the same sensation physically in my body as if I was laying on the couch sick for 3 days. Why would I do that? I would only do that if I didn't understand the metabolic response. And our clients don't know that either, right? Our clients don't know that either. So moving them and encouraging them to move and letting them know that part of their pain and stiffness and weakness is just in the absence of moving, that a walk around the block at lunchtime is really important. And standing up in between Zoom calls, while you have phone calls, to just get up and get in a different position is really important. So we get into the state of encouraging movement as a way of mitigating pain and discomfort, right? Because even if we don't have a compensatory pattern in our body, we can still create discomfort that leads to pain through atrophy. The muscles are atrophied, they can't function, which means when we do go to use them, like on the weekend, that's really what I believe is the precursor to the weekend warrior syndrome, right? Those who like work all week long, and then they go and run, 10Ks on the weekend and swim with their kids and play 18 rounds of golf and the whole bit. And then they come back to work on Monday and they're hobbling. The weekend warrior, it's not that the work that they were doing on the weekend was too much. It's that the absence of it during the week and then adding it on top of atrophied muscles is what gets them into trouble. Because when a muscle is atrophied, it doesn't create function. But then we go and ask it to do function that it can't do. And that's what leads to compensatory action. So sometimes our clients end up getting into pain and getting into sticky situations just because of their lifestyle. By going for days and days and days, creating this atrophy pattern, and then moving because they know that they need and want to and desire to. And then that missing function from an atrophied perspective on a muscle tissue is what creates a compensatory problem, which then leads to an injury. And then all of a sudden we're all, practitioner and client alike, are looking at this injury going, I don't really understand how this happened. I don't see the source of where this happened. The source could be atrophy or the beginnings of atrophy, the absence of movement. Yeah. So I'm hoping that that's landing, because we all know that movement is important, and now we have more information about why it's important. And then the wheel spinning starts to get hooked. We start to get hooked in it right here, which is, well, then everybody just gets to move. Except that the formula that I gave you guys a few weeks ago is alignment first, then strength, then function. Has to be. And we just talked about it with your client base too, with that population, Elizabeth, right? So yes, move, and move well, and know what that is so that both can be happening. Regular movement can be happening and well movement can be happening from an optimized place, meaning optimal alignment and optimal function. And that is really the recipe, a more expanded version of the recipe for keeping folks out of pain and even healing pain. One of the ways that we heal, we don't do the healing, but one of the ways that pain heals, functional pain heals, is by creating the function again from an optimal place. And that is, like, I describe it as taking the thread back through the eye of the needle, right? So if we have somebody who's moving like this, when really the function is meant to be moved like this, if we take them from here, make adjustments to here, going back through the eye of the needle might be really uncomfortable for them because of what got them to here in the first place. And that could be a whole host of, that's the source. That could be atrophy, it could be injury, it could be compensatory patterns, et cetera, et cetera. So we get to explore that and figure out what the source was so that we can prevent it from happening again and actually get to the root of the problem, and recognize that as we're taking them back to what's optimal, while it might be uncomfortable for them, it's never going to create more pain. And sometimes practitioners leave too soon because going back through the eye of the needle, going back from here to here, is uncomfortable for the patient and client. So we just pull away and we leave them here. And we don't recognize that we're doing that. So how's that landing? You're nodding, Elizabeth.
Yes, you talked about regular movement and well movement. And I was wondering, are you deliberately not saying poor movement? Because I think that there's an issue, isn't there, in how you describe movement, what terminology you use, how do you explain what's good, what's better, what's best? Is regular movement, what would that encompass as opposed to well movement?
I love this question. I love this question. So yes, I do avoid making someone bad or wrong, right? They're not moving poorly or wrong if they're moving through compensation. Their body's actually trying to recover. That's what compensatory action is about. That's what recruitment's about too. So there's no bad or wrong for sure. And yes, I love that you called that. We don't want to make our clients wrong or feel like they've somehow failed something that they didn't even know was pass or fail, right? And it's not. So definitely, yes, keep that out. And I choose the word optimal very deliberately because optimal doesn't mean perfect. Optimal also doesn't mean universal. Optimal means for that body in that state at that moment in time, what's optimal.
So
And
the
then,
body best it can. The body's doing it the best it can, and it might not be optimal, or it might be optimal.
almost. So just in the interest of making sure I don't leave gray space here, I'm going to elaborate. We might be saying the same thing and we might be missing each other just slightly. So I'm just going to elaborate. In my framework, when I'm working with clients, I know that they're doing the best they can every time they come in. Of course, they're doing the best they can. There's no question. And the best they can might not be optimal, which is why they've come to me, because we're all interdependent by design. And so they've asked me to, even if it's not in words, they've aligned with me, they've partnered with me to take them from where they are to where they could be, from where they are to where they could be. And that could be includes taking their pain sometimes through the eye of the needle back to where they could be, that they wouldn't necessarily do on their own. It's akin to like when you're working out on your own, do you do 25 sit-ups or do you do 50? If the trainer's there, you'd probably push out 50, but if left to your own devices, I mean, what's wrong with 25 or 30, right? So it's kind of like that. What they can do and what they're capable of doing can be different in that moment, or what they're choosing to do and what they're capable of doing could be different in that moment. So what they've come to me for is to take them to their full potential at that time, which doesn't mean let them off the hook and do less. It means prod them to get to where they can be at that time. How do I know that? We all get to know that by knowing what biomechanics and functional anatomy is. If I know that, then I'm clear. I know I'm not taking someone too far, and I know I'm not leaving them hanging less than their capability. That's part of the skill set. So once I have that skill set, I take them from where they're currently showing up to where they didn't think they could go, which doesn't necessarily mean to their full capacity as a human being. It means that in this moment, you have more in you than you're giving, like the equivalent of sit-ups. And it might be uncomfortable for you to get there, but because I know functional anatomy, I know where to take you back to, and I can never, create injury by doing that, as long as it's done, skillfully. And then once they get there, the whole body responds to that new patterning, so that the next time, now they've come in the first time here and we moved them to here, the next time they come in here and we move them to there. So what's 100% available to someone might be the difference from here to here, but in this day, their optimal is from here to here, never to go back, from here to here, not to go back. So in that moment, what's optimal for them? Not what they can do because they're uncomfortable. I don't really buy into that. I don't push people through pain. And you've heard me say that over and over again. Don't ever do that. But what I'm encouraging them through is what I absolutely know about the way the body is designed. And if I'm absolutely clear and my anatomy is so strong that I can pull on that as a skill set, then I know where I can take them. And so can you.
Yes. So you know what they are able to do on that occasion, on that day.
Yep. Even if they don't know they're able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So okay. we get to bridge that gap and know the difference for them based on our skill set and what we know about the body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when it's a condition of atrophy or other forms of tightness or compensatory action or recruitment or injury and rehab, those conditions all require us to have different knowledge. Right. So moving someone from an atrophied perspective back into function requires more feedback into the body so that the nervous system can register where you're asking it to move. That's different than stopping a compensatory pattern. That's different than stopping recruitment. That's different than repatterning a compensatory pattern. And it's also different than dealing with changes in tissues like orthopedic changes. Those are all different applications with the same outcome in mind. Getting someone from here to where they could be, step by step by step. And each protocol is different depending on what the client presents with.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm super excited about this because we talk about case studies a lot in my training program, and I like talking about them in concepts. You know, like there's lots of concepts that we can get to, but I also love talking about individual clients. Right. That's why we jump on here on our practitioner training days, and you know, practitioners will come in with their client questions, and the reason is because every client has a different thing, right? And we can learn from each of them. And when it comes to pain and injury, it can get a little information overload, I think, because pain and injury is as unique. You guys have heard me say this 100 times, and I'll continue to say it. Pain and injury is as unique as each person that comes through the door. I was looking at my window in the background. They don't come through the window. They could, if they wanted to crawl through the window, they could, but I prefer the door and a nice handshake and some eye contact anyway. Yeah, pain and injury is as unique as every person that comes through, you know, our door or our window to us. And that's because what got them into pain could be a combination of atrophy and compensatory patterns, whereas someone else with the same back pain could have a combination history of pregnancy and disc orthopedic issues. Same pain though, very different applications on how to remedy it for them, right? So pain and injury becomes really unique person to person. And the way we get to it is just going back to exactly how we know the body is designed, having a really solid foundation of that and application of it. And so when someone comes in with what we would consider a pathology, something that's not quite right, we can just tell it's not quite right. And we also know where to take them back to. And that's really the key. And then the how, of course, is part of the training. So we do go through, excuse me, a ton of case studies in the training program, and I love doing it. And I also love talking conceptually. And I think there's a place for both. Talking conceptually about how the body is designed and function, and general rules of thumb about navigating pain and patterns, and then also specifics on clients. You know, sometimes it just takes a little more thought and strategic thinking to really come up with a solution. So keep all of that in mind as you guys are navigating. And of course, I'm here to support in any way that I can. I love talking about it. I love doing the work too. And I also love talking about it with colleagues. So yeah, so we're going to be back here on Wednesday next week. Any other questions that I can support you with today while we're here?
Thank you. That's great.
Elizabeth, I love that you keep showing up. Tell me how it goes for you. Will you report back and let me know how it's going with your load-bearing population? Okay.
Thank you for all that good advice.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime. Okay, well, I hope to see you next week. Until then, continue to do great work in the